In this session, we are going to talk about how backup, restoration, and data protection work in Nerdio for Azure. We'll cover topics such as shadow copy and how to restore, recovery services, file recovery from Azure Backup, how to revert a desktop and a profile, and we'll touch on Azure Site Recovery. Enjoy the session.
Today's topic is going to be backup, restoration, and data protection inside of Azure and the Nerdio admin portal. So the first thing is I wanted to do an overview of what kinds of things you can do in Nerdio to back up and recover data. So let's log into 5009, the one we've been using for all of our demos here. And if we go under backup and DR and we go under in-region backup, we'll see that this backup is already going to be enabled. If you'll recall in the previous session, we looked in the back end to see what happens when you turn the button to enable the backup. It creates a backup vault in the Azure portal, calls it, let's actually look for it. So if we go to Services, Vaults, here's a Recovery Services Vault. There is our Nerdio Backup Vault. So that's what gets created. Backup gets placed on standard storage. So the way it's paid for is on a per gigabyte of consumption and operations. You also pay for operations with standard storage. Then Nerdio goes ahead and creates retention policies and schedules inside of this backup vault. So if we go here and we look at our backup policies, we'll see that there is a backup policy for 5009, and that policy by default is going to run once a day and is going to retain the data for 30 days, and the schedule is by default going to be 1 a.m. daily. Okay, this is a new field. You see it's not set right now. It actually used to be something that wasn't there, which caused us to create a feature in NAP that I'll show you just now. But the time zone obviously makes a difference as to when this backup actually runs. So once the backup vault is created, the retention policy is created, the schedule is created, the system goes through and adds all of the VMs that are in the environment into the backup by default. So the default behavior is every VM is going to be backed up on that default schedule at that particular retention, which is 30 days. If somebody wants to make changes, they can easily go into Azure, click on that policy, add additional retentions, yearly, monthly, weekly, number of days, or number of snapshots, and also change the frequency at which it runs. So really easy to make changes right now, not in the NAP, but it is something that's coming in the future version of backups. Once the backup is configured, again, all the VMs are added. The green indicates backup is enabled. At the time when you first enable it, the last backup status is going to be empty here, and the last restore point is going to be empty as well. And then the next time the backup runs, you're going to see this change to either complete or error if it didn't work, and then the restore point will show you what your latest backup is. The actions you can take with particular VMs, obviously there's a restore button that allows you to select from a 30 days or up to 30 days worth of backups. You select your snapshot. You can see it's taking about 5 minutes or so to do that backup. And then you check this box, and what this will do is it will recover the disk out of the backup vault into a storage account. It will then delete the current VM, so it will shut it down, delete it, and then it's going to recreate that VM with all the same parameters using the newly recovered disk. So this is a destructive operation in the sense that it will override the existing VM with a new VM off of that backup snapshot. Okay, so that's what the restore button does for you. The other thing you can do is trigger a backup to run right now. So if I wanted to back up DCL1, I can go ahead and do that. If I wanted to remove a certain VM from backup, like here, we went ahead and we removed these VMs from backup manually. So when you click on remove from backup, you have an option to either delete all previous backups that are associated with this VM or keep them in the vault. So if you leave this box checked, it's going to remove it from future backups, and it will also delete all the previous versions, even the ones from yesterday and the day before. If you leave this unchecked and you click confirm, it will remove the VM from future backups. So it will have the red backup not enabled icon to the left of it, but the backup snapshots are going to stay, and then eventually they're going to roll off based on the retention. Again, the default retention is 30 days. So after 30 days, those will be gone as well. Okay, so really clean and simple: restore, backup now, remove from backup. Once a VM is removed from backup, you can go ahead and re-enable it to be backed up. So let's go ahead and do that. And then while we're making these changes, if we go to the back end and look at, so here we have our backup jobs. The backup jobs will show you what actually happened in the past. So you can see we just triggered the backup of DCL1. It's currently running. It's going to take about 5 or 6 minutes, and then it's going to go into completed status. If a backup fails, you're going to see an error in the last backup state. You also have a notification that can be configured under settings notifications, where you can alert for backup operations. So when I made this change, then the admin users in this account will get notification for every action I just took. So if I enabled, disabled backup, or launched a new backup, it's going to notify people. But also, if a backup fails, there will be an email notification that will go to the partner admins, account admins, and also to any additional email addresses that are specified in this field. Okay, so a common question is, can I restore a specific file from the backup without restoring the entire server? So the answer is yes, you can. However, using the backup and restore module in Nerdio is not the way to do it. And it's also going to Azure Backup is also not the most common way of doing it. What do I mean by that? So every VM, every desktop and server that Nerdio configures has VSS, volume shadow copies, enabled on it. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as Andy. Okay, so for restoration of individual files, the first place to go is to use the previous versions and the shadow copies that are running by default on all of the VMs. So if somebody says, hey, I just need to recover a file, I don't want to recover the whole server, then that's the place to send them. Now, sometimes those are not available, either because the disk ran out of space and they got deleted, or maybe the machine is corrupted in some way and you can't really log into it completely, but still you don't want to uninstall, you don't want to recover the whole thing. So that is something that comes up occasionally. And the answer to restoring individual files from Azure Backup is that it is possible. Again, very uncommon that you do it that way. But if you wanted to restore something, let me show you how that looks. So you would go into a protected item. So here's the backup items. We click on virtual machines. We find our let's say FSO1. Okay, and then we find our backup. So let's say last night's backup. Click on that. And then there are two options. There's a restore VM, which is the equivalent of what we would do in the NAP when you click the restore button. And there is also a file recovery option. So if we go to file recovery, then we have to go through this three-step process. The first thing is selecting the recovery point. We already did that. Second one is downloading a script that is going to actually connect us to those files. So let's click on download executable. It's going to generate a random password and then place a little executable in my downloads. So it's still doing it, so give it a minute. Okay, while that's going, let's go back into the login we just went through. And when we right click on a folder and go to properties, we should have a previous versions tab. Now we noticed that on some deployments of session hosts and VDI desktop, that option is disabled. So we have a registry change that actually has already been applied to the default registry or to the template. But it is something that I want to show you. Let's see, I think it's software, Microsoft, Windows, current version, Explorer, and then there is this thing. See, there's a D word here that says no previous version page, and it's set to 1. We're going to set that to 0. And now, if we right click, we now have restore previous versions, and there's that new tab that was added. So it's a really easy fix for anyone who's missing that tab. It's going to be default now on every new desktop deployment. But there it is. You all know how to use this. You select your version. You never want to click the restore button. I think that's dangerous. What you want to do is click the open button that will open the file from that version. You can see the date stamp at the top, and then you can copy things in and out as needed. So that's the first go-to place for any file level restores. The second go-to place is what we just did, right? So here's my executable that's been downloaded. Here's my password. So I'll click that to copy it to clipboard. I'm gonna run this executable. It's going to run some PowerShell, and it's going to use the iSCSI connector to actually mount a volume on my laptop here that I'm connecting from to Azure to a particular VHD, and sometimes it doesn't work, which is one of the reasons we don't always use it. So let's see. I'm not sure why it didn't work, so I'm not going to troubleshoot it now. But the concept is you click download executable, you click on it, it runs PowerShell, it asks you for the password, you type in the password, you then go into your computer, and you will have a new drive that's going to be mapped under this PC. Okay, so you'll have a new drive right here. You double click on that drive. It's going to connect you to those files, and then you can copy them in and out. You can copy them out. It's read only, so you can't copy anything in, but you can take copies of those files. And then when you're done, you're actually going to click unmount disks. So that's something you should do. Otherwise, I think it automatically unmounts them in 12 hours. So once you unmount it, it will disappear from your computer, because you remember you're mounting an iSCSI target across the internet to Azure using this 3-step process. All right, let's talk about a couple of other things. So we looked at file backup and recovery from Azure and volume shadow copies. The next thing to talk about is the Revert desktop and Revert profile. So reverting profile is basically a function of the NAP that currently is going ahead and enumerating all of the available shadow copies on the VM that stores the profile. And that depends, right? So for example, if we have a user that's assigned to a specific RDS session host, then that user is using native profiles, which means that all of their data is stored on the C drive under C users of that particular VM. And this is now showing me all the different versions of that profile, or I'm sorry, of that volume that's available on that server. You can see it's 7 a.m. and 12 p.m. I can select the version that I want. I can check the box and click confirm. This is going to back up the current version of the profile. So first it's going to knock the user off the system. It's going to save the current version of the profile as a .archive with a date. It will then mount the volume shadow copy snapshot from the date I've selected. It's going to copy those folders out of that snapshot into the C users folder. It's going to reset all the necessary permissions and ownership, and it will then complete, which means the user can now log in and they will be using a profile from a previous version. So something that requires quite a few steps with lots of places to mess up when you're doing it manually, is something that we've automated to make it really easy. Now, if you don't have shadow copies, then there's going to be nothing in this list. If you have very few shadow copies, you have very few things in this list. It's not shadow copies on the profiles themselves. It's shadow copies on the volume that stores the profiles, which in the case of an RDSHL1 type of a user means that it's on the C drive of this VM. When we're using collections, you'll recall that the way profiles are managed are through user profile disks, UPDs, which are stored as VHD virtual disks, and those are stored on FSL1, not on the C drive of each individual session host. So when I go ahead and I click revert profile for a user that's assigned to a collection, it's going to go on FSL1 and give you a list of all of the snapshots available on the volume where those UPDs are. And then when you recover it, what it's actually doing, instead of writing into C users, it's obviously just restoring the VHD file from that version, replacing the current one that's there. And when the user logs in, the new one gets mounted, and that becomes their profile. So again, really convenient for recovering profiles specifically that still leverages VSS. If VSS is not working, not running, has been tampered with, and it's not available, then this function does not work. It's dependent on VSS. Okay. For VDI users, which doesn't look like I have any in this case, but for VDI users, there is an additional option here called the Revert Desktop. And the Revert Desktop option is going to delete the current desktop that's assigned to that user and is going to create a brand new one for them that's based on the golden image WS00. So WS00, as you'll recall, is under the servers module. You come in here, can power it on and make changes. This is going to be the golden image that all VDI users are created from. So when you do Revert Desktop, it deletes that VM that's currently assigned and recreates it from this template. The implications are that anything outside of the documents, desktop, and favorites folders, which are the ones that are redirected by default to FSL1 for every user, everything else gets erased. So any software that was installed that's not on the golden, any customizations that were done as part of the profile that are outside of desktop and documents, all of that is going to be gone, which isn't sometimes that's what you want. You want to start fresh, but everything in documents and desktop is going to be retained. Okay, so revert profile recovers a profile from a VSS image, a VSS snapshot. Revert desktop recreates the desktop fresh from the golden image. Okay, then the final topic that I want to talk about is DR. Let's just remind ourselves of a few concepts around DR. So again, DR means ASR, and DR is a use case that leverages the ASR tool to do something very specific. So whereas backup, you'll recall when you enable backup, we get to specify what type of storage you're using for that backup. It could either be LRS, locally redundant storage, which means it's in the same region as the source VMs, or it could be GRS, geo-redundant storage, which means it's going to be both local and in a paired region, which you don't really get to select. It's whatever Microsoft has determined is the pair for that particular environment. Excuse me. And the backup thing runs on a schedule. It's not continuous, and it's backing up within the same region as the VM. So if you look at the backup recovery vault, you will see that the backup recovery vault is in the same region as the VMs. And if it's not in the same region as the VMs, you will actually not be able to select it as a destination for your backup. So if you had some requirement of having VMs in a particular location, even if there is an Azure region there, you couldn't use the backup functionality to put a backup of that VM in that other region, okay? This is where DR comes in, or this is where ASR, Azure Site Recovery, comes in. Azure Site Recovery uses replication rather than scheduled backups. It is designed to be used as either a migration tool to kind of move the bits for a particular VM from one location to another. It could be from on-prem into Azure, so it's often used for migration purposes. And it could also be used for DR from an Azure deployment, let's say in the South Central region, to another region, let's say in the east or west of the US, or maybe another continent. Okay, and the way that that works, so let me just pull up Azure Site Recovery pricing. So with backup, you recall there is a license fee, something like $5 or $10 for every 50 gigabytes. And then there is a storage fee. For Azure Site Recovery, so there are two types of licenses. There could be Azure Site Recovery to a customer-owned site, meaning I have an Azure deployment and I want to replicate my data to a data center that I own. And then for the first 31 days, it's free. And then after that, it's $16 per instance, meaning per VM that you're protecting, regardless of how much storage is on it, because storage is charged separately, okay? But the more common scenario is Azure to Azure or on-prem to Azure, right? The destination that we typically deal with is when people are going to Azure, whether they're coming from another Azure region because they want to have the environment redundant and a hot site in another location, or because they're migrating from on-prem into Azure. So the reason it's free for the first 31 days is because if you're leveraging ASR for migration, if you're pulling in VMs from on-prem into Azure, they don't want to charge you for it because once you're in Azure, you're going to stay in Azure. But then once you go after 31 days, that means you're using it for DR purposes, in which case you're charged $25 per month per instance, plus any associated storage that you are consuming in the destination region. So there is a license fee per instance, and then there is a storage fee that basically is the same as the storage fee for your source environment. So let's say you have a VM that's a file server, it has an OS disk of P10 and a data disk of P20. You know, P10 is, you know, $19 a month, and P20 is, let's say, whatever, $80 a month. When you're using ASR, you're going to pay $25 for the VM itself, for the license, and then you're going to pay the same amount if you're using the same kinds of disks in the DR location as you do in the source location. So storage you always pay for, and the license you always pay for. Now, if you power on that VM, right, so normally those VMs in the destination region are turned off, so you're not paying for compute consumption. But if you turn it on for something like a DR test or failover, then you're also paying the compute. So always for storage and compute as needed.